Karen, and I will be your conference operator today. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to the Microsoft SQL Server 2005 End of Service webinar. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. If you should need assistance during the call, please press star, then 0, and an operator will come back online to assist you. I would now like to turn the call over to Ms. Misty Zimmer. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar. I'd like to point out a few housekeeping items. At the end of this presentation today, there is a Q&A pod located on your screen. You can type in questions at any time, but at the end, we'll save them for then, and we'll answer any questions you may have. Also, after the webinar, there will be a drawing for an Acer 10 2-in-1 tablet laptop. If you are the winner, you will be contacted in 24 hours. And Matt will be our presenter today from Tech Data. He's on the Microsoft team. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Misty. Hi, everyone. So I'm Matt Hamilton, and I'm a solutions rep for Windows Server, SQL, and Azure here at Tech Data. I specialize in business development around Server and SQL and licensing, as well as technical pre-sales for Microsoft Azure. So today's webinar, we're going to be covering the upcoming end of service for SQL 2005, what kind of customers will typically get affected by the end of life, our migration options that are available. I'd like to make sure that everybody is prepared and able to have that conversation. So I'll be speaking about how we can leverage this end-of-life service to do some cross-sells and upsells, and I'll cover Azure's features very briefly and talk about how to license SQL. So on April 12th next year, end of service is going to start. So we're calling it the SQLocalypse. It's coming, and this is a good time to start preparing for it. So when end of service happens, it means there's no patches, no support, no content updates, which is scary stuff because according to Microsoft, half of our current databases out there are SQL 2005. When end of life hits, our most prepared partners should be those in the financial, medical verticals, looking specifically at partners with end users that need HIPAA and PCI compliance. Both of these require that the patch and updated software is in use. A SQL upgrade is one of the necessary steps to get them within the industry guidelines. And we're going to still have some stragglers out there on old versions of Server and Windows OS that are coming in. We just went through the Windows Server 2003 end of life and got slammed with new orders, and we're still seeing people come in from that downgrade. So by taking advantage of it now, there's some promos I'm going to cover that help lower the cost, and you can really help your customers avoid a business disruption by doing their upgrades now ahead of time and getting them prepared. And you can also wrap in some cross-sales, so it's a really good opportunity to increase your revenue. And as you can see here, too, according to Microsoft, 82% of small, medium businesses with server licenses have at least one occurrence of SQL Server 2005, so that means there's a lot of money on the table here. Another side of this is making sure that we have the correct licensing. So people who've been in the industry for a while will remember that we had a change from processor to core-based licensing with SQL. So we're estimating that there's about 3.5 million sitting around out there with 570 SMB customers that have too few core licenses for enterprise models and about 8.5 million in revenue with people that have too few core licenses for standard. So there's about 12 million in potential revenue sitting out there. And a lot of the time that comes because people don't know that there's a minimum and maybe they just buy online through the shop and they're licensed incorrectly. And if they get a Microsoft SAM audit, that can end up costing them down the road. So in addition to having expired licensing, there's a lot of customers that are needing to add new hardware and their service provider wasn't aware of it. So sometimes they just add hardware without telling our partners. That mistake can get very costly. So that core to processor switch happened with 2008 SQL Server, and people licensing that incorrectly and not meeting the 4-core minimum is probably the thing I see most often when people are out of compliance. So the minimum is actually two 2-core licensing packs, and getting these out and getting upgraded and in compliance, also helps keep your partners with the most modern software. Every time they come out with a new edition of SQL Server, we're looking at performance enhancements, improved security, and better ROI. So we have a couple migration options here. All the buzz going around about the cloud's great, but we still have our partners that are going to do traditional on-premise. We have people that are going to be born in the cloud, and we also have our hybrid partners. So I wanted to discuss a couple of the paths on what your options are for upgrading. So when we're ready, we have the traditional on-prem deployments, but we also have the Azure in the cloud. So when you're ready to replace an existing machine and use virtualization, you can maximize your resource allocations or do a mix of both. On-premise can get costly. Sometimes partners rent space in their own data centers to customers. We can also do licensing through SPLA. That's our service provider licensing agreement. So if you rent hardware to customers that stays on their premise, you can also lease them the licensing. We can get some information to you about that if you're looking for it. Just shoot me a message. Our other migration path might be moving to Azure. You have maybe some updated hardware, but an old SQL server that never really needed to get upgraded. So maybe the customer wants to keep their existing on-premise and add a SQL server or database in the cloud, which is pretty similar and almost identical to what a traditional on-premise deployment would be. And we can also grab a database that comes with a great SLA, is a little bit more efficient price-wise, and is a good solution for SMB. So we can go with SQL Server 2014, Azure SQL Database, and Azure VMs. So a lot of partners are going to want to see what the upgrades are from 2005 to 2014. Here's just a list of some of the benefits. Just some of the biggest ones are SQL Server Always On, which enables you to do failover clustering as well, our enhanced security features such as user-defined roles, enhanced encryptions and backup encryptions. These are going to let you secure your data and safeguard business, which, as we all know, the more and more data gets put out on the internet, the more security people are usually looking for. SQL 2014 is the first edition with direct links to Azure. We can protect our servers and roll a disaster recovery plan in for a much lower price than a traditional co-location, which is great because colo can get very expensive, and it's a good product for SMB. That's called Azure Site Recovery, and I'll go into that briefly later. We get a plethora of rich features that make you a more efficient and optimized business machine. Now, we understand that some people would prefer to use older versions of SQL, and some line of business apps don't support the newest ones, so you are able to use your downgrade rights to take advantage of SQL 2008 if that's what you and your partner decide is best. That's a right that's given when buying through volume licensing, so any addition you buy, you're able to downgrade up to 3 versions back. So we have 3 models of SQL 2014. I'm sure most people are familiar with the Enterprise, Business Intelligence, and Standard editions. Of these 3, Enterprise and Standard are the most common that I sell. And there's a few questions you can ask to determine, which edition do I need? So you can ask questions with high availability relation, such as how critical is your application and can you afford downtime? SQL Server 2014 Standard Edition provides basic high availability with built-in database mirroring and failover clustering. Enterprise Edition provides the new always-on availability groups, which give you high-performance database mirroring and supports Mac OS X for clustering and offers fast recovery times. If we need to look at from a security standpoint, we can ask them how they protect their data from internal and external threats, and also do you have PCI, HIPAA, PII, or ITAR requirements. If the answers to that is yes, we can look at Enterprise Edition, which can secure the data with built-in transparent database encryption capability, which encrypts your data on the disk and prevents lost, stolen, or improperly accessed data from being easily read. Enterprise Edition also provides fine-grained auditing so that customers can see who's accessed and amended the values in a database, so you're always able to track and see when the data has been accessed or edited. And if we're looking at the performance end of it, do you have slow-running reports and applications? If you do, then a new feature in the Enterprise Edition, which is for in-memory transaction processing, gives you 5 to 20 times performance improvements on the same hardware and transparency to the applications. And if you need business intelligence features, obviously we can go with the BI Edition, which gives you enterprise solutions, and customers can implement for Power Pivot, SharePoint, and the new Power View. So once we determine that edition, we can start looking at how to license it. So we need to decide if we want to go Cal or Core. So the Server and Cal edition is you license each server with a basic license and then a Cal per user. With the Core edition, we're going to license all of the cores in the machine. So we have a couple more questions to ask there. A real easy one to eliminate is, do you have a public-facing website or application? If the answer is yes, then we have to go with per core licensing model because we're not going to be able to count the number of users that we have. And if the answer is no, we can ask them outright, can you count your users and devices? If the answer is yes, we can go with the server and Cal model. But if it's no, we're going to know we need the per core licensing model. So with the per core model, a license is required for each physical or virtual core that's accessed by an operating system in the environment running the SQL Server software. Like we said earlier, there's a minimum of 4 cores per processor or per VM, and you don't need CALs with the core model. If you're licensing with the core model and you go with SQL Enterprise Edition, it's going to give you the right to run unlimited virtual machines when you access all cores on the physical server with software assurance. So if someone's running SQL in a heavily virtualized environment, we almost always go with SQL Enterprise Core Edition. With the server and user device Cal model, we're going to look for, like we said, people where we can't count the number of users. A license is required for each operating system environment, the running of a SQL instance server software, and all users or devices that are accessing directly or indirectly require a Cal. So to figure out those numbers, we're going to look at, with the server and Cal model, how many instances of SQL are needed, how many users are accessing, and do we want software assurance on it. So for both versions, the software assurance is going to give you high availability. So you can use an active-passive scenario. The passive copy can use writes are included only with software assurance. Without the software assurance, your passive server needs to be licensed like an active server. So you're going to have to license it fully for both servers. It also gives you license mobility so that it can be used in public clouds like Microsoft Azure, and you can also move it between physical servers. And it also gives you unlimited virtualization rights when licensing all cores with Enterprise Core Edition. And as usual, we get the upgrade rights under coverage. So if you're thinking maybe SQL 2016 when it comes out might be a good one for me, you can go ahead and grab software assurance, and when that product is deployed and released to the public, you'll be able to upgrade directly to SQL 2016. You also get 24/7 web-based help desk support, and you also get an additional license for an off-site cold backup server. Software assurance is a great upsell with your partners. So when we're looking at the core model, when you're not able to count, so if it's a website or anything, we just need to know how many cores or virtual cores are in the server, if they want standard or enterprise edition, and if we want software assurance. So licensing SQL isn't as tricky as it seems, and we're also here at Tech Data to help you walk through any of that. You can always get a hold of us at Microsoft@techdata.com, and I'll also put some contact info up here. So if you have any questions, we'll be able to hop on there and help you out. So some common things we see for cross-sells and upsells. SQL databases are pretty important typically. A lot of customers keep their end-user info, CRM data, billing, and accounts info. That's important, and if you don't have a DR plan in place and a SQL server gets knocked down, it's going to cost the businesses a lot of money. So a very common sense product to attach to this is going to be disaster recovery and cloud storage. Just from a business continuity standpoint, you can attach Azure Backup to SQL Server, which will back up your files and folders and tables that are on there. And you can also use Azure Site Recovery, which is a great alternative to co-location. It's charged on a per instance cost, and it asynchronously replicates that server to Azure. And if you're using a SQL VM virtual machine in Azure, you can also attach additional Azure storage, which has the benefit of even the cheapest version at 2.4 cents a gig. You have 3 copies of that data, so you're not going to lose that data in case a disaster hits. Another cross-sell is System Center for management. For those who aren't familiar, System Center is used in database applications, and it's a solution for managing private clouds and client devices. If you get a client management edition, you can empower people to use their devices and applications they need to be productive, and that's going to help you maintain your corporate compliance and control. Then we also have a product called Windows Intune, which is for mobile device management that ties in with System Center SQL nicely. For upselling, we can look at the software assurance. I went over those features, but once again, it gives you failover support and cold backup rights. You get your license mobility, and you can move that frequently within the server farm, host, cloud in the same license. And then you also get your high-density virtualization, where if a client's got a data center, they're going to want high-density virtualization. And we can also upsell. So on the server and CAL model, we can upgrade to the core model a lot of times. It can be more cost efficient. The core is drastically more expensive, but when you get to around 30 users, you start to see the break-even point. So if we're at a few less users than that, and we're thinking it may expand in the future, it's typically better to go with the core model. That way you're not buying the CALs. So just a brief overview of the differences between the editions. We're going to take a look, and we can see that the standard edition is going to have a few features that the business intelligence is not going to have without the enterprise. So we usually see an all or nothing. I don't do that much of the business intelligence edition. It's more of the enterprise and standard. But you get a lot more availability related services and data center functionality when you're going with enterprise over standard. So SQL gets a bit pricey, and we've got some promos in place to help you out. Survivor, the SQL, it's the cheesiest promo we've ever had, but you can get 2.5% off your next Windows Server or SQL order with Tech Data. So what this is here to help is people that are still running on those old versions. The cool thing is that you can go ahead and get the 500 level pricing. So if it is a big upgrade deal, we can even give you the better pricing level, and we can also go ahead and wrap in an additional 2.5% off. Last month, this was great. We had a ton of customers take advantage of this and stack it with the Microsoft SMB Advantage promo, which gives you a 15% back-end rebate for your customer to then spend with you on future services or Microsoft products. We've got that in place for this month too, but it's on Windows Server instead of SQL Server. So that's 90 days. They have 90 days from the date of purchase to use those funds with you for future services. So if maybe you do the SQL upgrade and then we find out like, okay, well, you know, we need a Windows Server upgrade. We can go ahead and wrap that SMB Advantage in and help out with that server upgrade pricing or the SQL upgrade to help you get more funding and maybe use a better price point. If you have an opportunity and you'd like to get some promo dollars, please reach out and we'll see what we can do to help out. It's definitely something that we like to see and help out with our partners with, because with so many upgrades coming into place, we want to make sure that everyone's able to do their upgrade. So the other side of this coin is an Azure migration. So where we're seeing this happen is, say you've got some old aging infrastructure on-premise and it's from 2005. This is before cloud was really an option, and they've been thinking about getting it out of the house. So we can go ahead and move that SQL Server into Azure on a SQL VM, which would fall under Infrastructure as a Service, so IaaS, or we can go ahead and move that onto a SQL Database as a Service, which would be the Platform as a Service, so PaaS. The key differentiator here is if it's a virtual machine, you're going to have to design it, you're going to have to upload it and maintain it. You're going to be responsible for the patching and updating, and we're going to have to build it in such a way that it's highly available if that's a mission-critical application. With the Azure SQL Database as a Service, Microsoft has a guaranteed SLA attached to that, which is cool, especially for our partners out there that are managed service providers, because it takes a lot of the workload off of you. So I'm just going to go over Azure real briefly. A lot of people are still getting a hang of it. So Azure's Infrastructure and Platform as a Service, there's all kinds of availability. What this really gives you is the option to build it yourself and control it, and then there's also options in there for you to have Microsoft build it, and Microsoft controls it, the patching and updating. You can modify the application. You can do most of the things. Think of it kind of like Office 365 when we first moved to Hosted Exchange. The functionality is there for the end user, but you don't have to maintain that server yourself. There's no more patching or updating on it. So this is great when you have a scalable application. You have a customer that wants you to take over their business. So MSPs love Azure. It's got really good margins. It's scalable and consumption-based. So the key here with the cloud, and what a lot of people are starting to finally start taking advantage of, is if you don't need the resources, you don't need to pay for them. There's no point in having a virtual machine running in the cloud that's got 20% processor memory utilization. And using Azure, we can scale that back and go to a smaller instance with less resources attached and make sure that we're utilizing our money that's being put into that and getting the best performance to dollar ratio that we can. We have two sales models where we can purchase that. We have Open and CSP. I'm sure some of you are familiar with CSP from the Office 365 migration that's been going on. So our first option, we can put Azure in a virtual machine. The great thing here is it's going to reduce project overhead. Azure virtual machines bill hourly. So if we know that that SQL Server only needs to be on Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, it's a small instance, we can script that machine to shut on and off during those times. That way we're only getting billed for 160 hours a month versus the traditional 740 if we were on all day, every day. You can speed your time to market. If they need something that they need to develop and get out this week, we need to spin up a disaster. Something went down, we have a copy of the database, we need to put it somewhere. We can quickly spin up a server for that customer, get their data migrated there, and get them going. We also have secure and redundant source code. The company Telenor saved 70% on their testing and development that could be turned off when they're finished to minimize their capital outlays. What this really means is when you do dev and test, traditionally you have to buy a server to do dev and test on. When you use a platform like Azure, you can just rent that server for the time you need, and when you're not using it, you shut it off and deallocate those resources, and you're not getting charged for it anymore. So we're ready in hours, not weeks, no resource limits. What that means is you can scale this thing up to monster proportions, 24 gig of RAM, huge SSDs. You can attach all the storage you'd ever need to it. So it's a very high-speed and scalable platform that really just works well. Some people get a little scared of the infrastructure in the cloud, but it's similar to think of it like a branch office or, you know, that closet and or that server on the other side of the building that you RDP into to control. The other thing to note here is that when you're building a SQL virtual machine in Azure, you can bring your own SQL license or you can lease it. So what that means is you have to rent the server OS from us for Windows Server, but you're able to buy a SQL license and outright purchase that, or you can lease it hourly. It depends on what your environment looks like, and if you're interested, we can discuss an opportunity more in depth to see what's best and get an idea of the pricing. The other thing to consider is if it needs to be high availability and have an SLA for uptime attached to it, you'll need to build what's called an availability set. Without getting too technical, that's just 2 copies of the same machine with a shared storage pool and no files kept locally on either of those. So if one machine's down, the other one's not, so you have 100%, 99.9% uptime. Our other option would be an Azure SQL Database. So a SQL database is a relational database as a service that's fully managed by Microsoft. That means there's no administration for you other than your initial upload into it. These are looking at your database to IT ratio. Anything that's in an existing application that requires a full box product functionality is going to work better in a server VM. As you can also see, if the customer's got ecosystem of resources for support and maintenance. Sorry to read these to you. They're a little shady on my screen. TCO benefits is you can remove CapEx, and the scalability is you can get up to 20,000 IOPS. So the things that go in Azure SQL Database is the best are applications that need elastic scale and or reduced overhead. For resources, we're looking at customers do not want to add additional resources for support and maintenance. We're avoiding CapEx increases and reducing operational expenses. And for scalability, we can get thousands of databases in a very short amount of time. The most common things I see people putting in the SQL databases are newer line of business applications, also anything that's been custom developed, web-based applications, almost all those go in. We have a lot of partners putting websites with a SQL database backend as a popular solution. Some of you may be familiar with this. Microsoft started them out a while ago, but our SLA has increased drastically. The new performance has increased drastically. You've got more secure and more protection. There's geo restore, standard and active geo replication. So if the data center up in Virginia gets wiped out by a hurricane, you can still spin that data up through the central data centers or the West Coast data centers. You can get ISO, HIPAA, and BAA, EU model clause auditing on SQL databases. Pretty much any type of compliance you're looking for, Azure can cover. It just depends on how you put your data in there, and there's some guidelines we can give you, and there's also a resource to what types of compliance are covered. And then you're also billed hourly and on a broad set of price points. So what that means is I've got a huge selection of different SQL databases with sizes and resource pools you can choose from. We've got things from down as low as $7 a month up to thousands of dollars a month. We had one of our partners was looking at buying a new SQL hardware and upgrading them for a new line of business application, and we ended up getting them to go with a SQL database, and their cost was about $35 a month versus a few thousand to upgrade. And they don't have any back-end work they need to do. And we can also support terabytes of data. So, and we've got DTU throughputs. That's basically how many transactions a second it can handle. So we have ones that are low with, 5 transactions a second up to thousands of transactions a second. And then you can scale your database size, and you've got your scale-out options listed here. 5,000 DTUs, maximum terabyte. Maximum size is 25 terabytes. That's a pretty big database. And then what are customers doing with SQL Database? Re-architecting for software as a service. We've got multi-tenants, rebuilds for Azure, and thousands of databases. So you can basically move an entire huge SQL data center into SQL databases if the hardware is right. And we can take a better look at that. Some companies that use them are EasyJet, that's a major European airline, Callaway Golf Club, Samsung, and Pottermore, which is the new Harry Potter website. And these are really good for decreasing customer costs. SQL Server 2014 in Azure is going to reduce your overall cost of ownership and provide instant cloud scale. Like I said, we want to make sure if you just go and pick a size and turn the machine on and run it, a lot of times it's not going to be cheaper than on-premise. But when we look at your resource utilization and find something that makes sure you're in that sweet spot between 70 and 80% processor or memory utilization, we can really get you a lot of resource for your dollar and usually cheapen up what it would be from going with the new on-premise upgrade and putting in new servers. Some trends we see with Azure are that our MSPs are generally our first adopters because of the nature of it. Our managed service providers really just go all out after it. You can monitor it remotely. It's made for that. It's scalable. It's elastic. When the customer grows, you can grow their data center needs with it in Azure. The easiest way to get started is with disaster recovery and identity management. So Azure Active Directory. It's not a replacement for your on-premise Active Directory, but it is an extension. You can have single sign-on for websites like Concur and Salesforce, multi-factor authentication. It's a really good addition. And then we're typically seeing ramp-up times for partners to really start growing their business where they go from just 1 or 2 deals to 15 or 20 is 1 to 6 months. If you've got someone on the team that does a lot of virtualization, Azure's a really good sale to add on. And we see exponential growth after the first few sales. And our most common attached, and why I'm harping on it, is Windows Server and SQL Server, Office 365, and then we're seeing a lot of remote desktop sessions hosted in Azure with RDS CALs, and a lot of these are using SQL somewhere on the back end. And we've got 2 models to purchase through the CSP model. The easiest way to describe that is it bills like a utility at the end of the month. So you use your services in there, and then you receive a bill, and you pass that bill on to your partner. Or you can do open licensing, which is like the prepaid cell phone plan. We're going to estimate what you use on either one, but with the prepaid cell phone plan, if you go over, you simply let the credit roll. It's good for 1 year. And if you go under, you just add additional credit. So you can start having the conversations about your migration paths with SQL. We're here to help. We can get you some readiness and lead generation materials on the Microsoft Partner Network. We can also look at ready-to-go marketing. There's event templates, sales presentations, videos for your customers. I like them a lot. They're really easy to white label and brand up with your company information, and they're very good partner-facing documents. Some of the other tools we have, too, is the MAP toolkit, which is the migration assessment. And we can use that to see what kind of system you're going to need to upgrade to. as far as what versions are ready. So if you've got a 2005 database, we can run the map toolkit on your SQL Server, and it'll tell you, you're ready for SQL 2008. The system can be moved to SQL 2012. There's also some database migration wizards and tools out there. So it's not a very difficult process, and Microsoft's definitely put some tools out there to help ease that pain and get you guys going. And if you're looking for some help, we've got over 30 people that are willing to work with you to help you increase profits in business development. We can answer any technical questions you have with our engineering team. So you can contact myself or our systems engineer, John. John's got over 24 years experience on the Microsoft line, and I have not stumped him yet. So there's our contact information and extensions there, and our emails as well. And I think, Misty, I'm about done here. So do we have any questions?
Yes, we have a few questions here. What kind of applications fit with SQL databases in Azure?
Those applications would be ones that need to be highly scalable. So a lot of the times we see website backends are by far the most popular to go in there. Some accounting databases and software like that. They typically need to be more on the modern end, as it doesn't connect with a SQL connection string. It uses a Windows connection string. So that's really what we're seeing people put into the SQL Database as a service.
Okay. How do we sign up for the rebate?
You can sign up for the rebate. So it's after you close a deal, you'll register that deal with the Partner Investment Engine. You can find that by going to Bing or your favorite search engine and looking up Microsoft Partner Investment Engine, commonly known as a PI tool. Some of you may remember it used to be called the Big Easy, and that was where you registered your deals on there.
Okay. Can we license as a device and have users connect through that box?
So that's called multiplexing, and that's not allowed with the SQL Server licensing. That's typically done to reduce licensing costs, but you can't have, 2 boxes. You license both those and then have thousands of users connect from the one box. That's not typically allowed.
Also, if someone has requested a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, are we able to send that over to them?
Yes, absolutely.
Vinny, if you could just type in your email there, that would probably be best, and then we can send it to you. Thank you. Also, what kind of license rights do we have for physical hosts? What if a box is destroyed? Can we move those licenses?
Yeah. So with volume licensing, one of the benefits over OEM is you actually get you have mobility rights to a degree without software assurance. So if you have software assurance, you can move them as often as needed. And if you have just no software assurance, every 90 days you can move them. So in case of a disaster, you are able to move that license to another box.
Great. Do we have any other questions? Okay, looks like not. I guess we're all set here. I just want to thank everyone for attending today, and I hope you have a fantastic day.